It's a good song, though.
Well, let me introduce our next speaker. He's a good friend of mine, known him for a long time. Colonel O'Connor. I know he doesn't like that. He's technically Captain O'Connor, but I say if you're the head of the military wing of the 140th Reenactors, you need to be a colonel. So I promoted him. But Michael's also a member of the AOH, and he is the military leader of the 140th New York Volunteers, which is a reenacting group. We frequently honor Colonel Patrick O'Rourke in name and in deed, and I'll turn it over to another fellow historian, Michael.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. Hi, guys. So, here to talk about Patrick Henry O'Rourke. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to say about him, I started to think about how people who live in Rochester have a connection to him and probably don't even realize it. So real quick, just with a show of hands, how many of you have lived in the city of Rochester at some point? Okay. How many of you have Irish heritage, descent? Okay. How many of you have driven over the old Stutson Street Bridge, now named the O'Rourke Bridge, right? So in all these different ways, we have a connection to this man, right? Which is something that, if you don't think about it, you don't realize it, right? We all have a connection to this guy, right? But why? Why was he important? What did he do? So that's what I'm here to talk about. O'Rourke was born March 25th, 1837, to Patrick Sr. and Mary. He was the youngest of 6 kids, something that we don't really think about now. Back then, they had many kids, and so he was the youngest of 6. He was born in Ireland, in County Cavan, and emigrated to the United States in 1842. Originally, they moved to Canada and then worked their way down to Rochester. They settled in a part of the city known as Little Dublin. We don't call it Little Dublin anymore. It is the area around where the Genesee Brewery is today. He went to public school and did very well. He did so well that, in fact, when he graduated at the age of 16, he was awarded a full scholarship to the newly formed University of Rochester. Now, he ended up not accepting that scholarship, and there's 2 reasons. Shortly before he graduated high school, his father had passed away, at which time the boys went to work. And so Patty joined an apprenticeship to be a stone cutter. The other reason, which I think is probably the driving factor as to why he did not accept this scholarship, was the leadership that formed and created the University of Rochester were Baptists. O'Rourke, being a Catholic, and his mother, now the head of the family, a staunch Catholic, would not have been agreeable to that, going to a university that was founded and led by Baptists. So therefore, he did not accept this scholarship. In 1857, he received a nomination to join West Point. He was nominated by Congressman John Williams. O'Rourke really wasn't on his radar. He was suggested to him, and then after the congressman, looked them up, basically, realized that he would be a great candidate for West Point. So in 1857, he becomes a cadet at West Point. Now, because he didn't go from graduating high school right into West Point, he ended up being one of the oldest in his class. And he ends up graduating in 1861. He was supposed to graduate in 1862, but he ends up graduating in 1861 because the Civil War had started in 1861. And it quickly became apparent that the Union would need large armies, and you needed good officers to lead those armies. And so O'Rourke is graduated early in the second class of 1861. He graduates top of his class, number 1, which is very significant because not only was he, how do I say this? He had proven himself, which was unusual for the time because he was an Irish immigrant, okay? He was the first and only non-native born to go to West Point. And so him graduating top of his class at a time and age where the Irish were discriminated against, that was really significant, okay? He was very well liked by his classmates. A upperclassman said of O'Rourke, he was popular with all, and that I was impressed by his manly bearing, his kindness, and unassuming manner. That tells me that he was probably a more quiet guy. I would suspect he was probably an introvert. He cared about his studies more than his social life. But he was still respected, especially by upperclassmen. To receive a compliment of this nature from an upperclassman, especially back then, like that was significant. So he ends up graduating first in his class. What's very interesting about this is that while he graduated first, at the bottom of that class is someone that everyone should be familiar with, a guy by the name of George Armstrong Custer. Everyone's aware of Custer. So O'Rourke is at the top, Custer is at the bottom. And there is evidence that they had some sort of friendship or relationship. That is evidenced by Custer gave O'Rourke, when he got commissioned, a pistol. O'Rourke carried that pistol until his death. And then after his death, the O'Rourke family returned this pistol to the Custer family. And that pistol now is in the museum that's in Arizona, where the Battle of Little Bighorn took place. There is also evidence that O'Rourke's wife, which I haven't mentioned yet, he gets married in 1862. I haven't gotten there yet, but his wife, Clara Bishop, and Custer's wife were friends. There's evidence that they shared rooms together when visiting their husbands in Washington, D.C. area. So after O'Rourke graduates, he becomes an engineer, all right? Top of the class, become engineers. Bottom of the class, cavalry, all right? So that's why O'Rourke joins the engineers. He sees action at the first Battle of Bull Run. He's right in the thick of it. And he has his horse shot out from underneath him. He has a bullet go through his coat. So right away, he demonstrates that he is a leader with courage. After first Bull Run, he sailed with the Port Royal expedition in October of 1861. He provided reconnaissance and engineering in the construction of the batteries on Jones, Bird, and Tybee Islands. And this was all for the bombardment of the siege of Fort Pulaski. In April of 1862, he was selected as one of the officers to receive the surrender of Fort Pulaski. So that's pretty significant. And again, we're talking about an Irish immigrant, right? So all of these kind of accolades and laurels, right, is very unusual and almost unheard of for an Irish immigrant during this time. Now, in August of 1862, Rochester forms a new regiment, the 140th New York. Now, there was a man by the name of Louis Ernst who was instrumental in the raising of the 140th. Louis Ernst was a German immigrant. And as the regiment is being formed, there is a big push for Louis Ernst to be the colonel of the 140th. And Ernst understands that this regiment really needs to be commanded by a professional soldier. Ernst was not a professional soldier. So Ernst says, I will be second in command, but I want someone to be a professional soldier that is going to lead these troops. And so O'Rourke gets appointed as the colonel of the 140th. What's unique about this situation is you have Ernst, a German immigrant, and about half of the regiment is made up of German descent. And then you have O'Rourke of Irish heritage, and basically the second half of the regiment is made up of men of Irish descent. So your two top leaders are Irish and German, and your two major ethnicities within the regiment are Irish and German. Not so much a unique situation, but I always found that very interesting, that the men, found leaders from their own heritage. So O'Rourke takes over the regiment in 1862, and he's got his hands full. The 140th had already developed a bit of a reputation for being rowdy and kind of out of control, if you will. On their train ride down to Elmira, apparently a bottle or two, perhaps, of whiskey was discovered. And as can happen from time to time, the men got a little rowdy, and apparently a couple windows on the train got broken. And so right away, the 140th kind of gets this not so good reputation. The 140th was brigaded in the 5th Corps. Now, the 5th Corps is where the regular Army troops were assigned. And so now the 140th is assigned with all of these regular troops. Also in their brigade is the 5th New York. The 5th New York wore flashy Zouave uniforms, and they were known for their highly skilled bayonet drills. Like this regiment would literally tour around the country giving demonstrations of bayonet drill, and it was like a social event like we're here at today. Hundreds of people would turn out to watch these bayonet drill demonstrations. So O'Rourke knew that he needed to get his men into shape so that way he could, I use this term kind of loosely, but compete with the other units that he was brigaded with. So O'Rourke wrote that, I have been trying to make my men believe that there is no reason why they should not be at least equal, if not superior, to the regular troops. And so he starts training them. And really quickly, the men understand that while O'Rourke is compassionate, he is also a disciplinarian, all right? And Adjutant Ira Clark wrote, every man knew that in his colonel, so long as he did his duty, he had a kind friend. So it kind of shows the personality of O'Rourke. He was all business when it came to military affairs and getting his regiment ready to fight in the war. But at the same time, he had a soft, kind touch to him that his men knew and could trust in him. He had already developed his reputation at Bull Run for bravery, so it inspired confidence in his men. And it really turned the 140th into one of the best regiments, and I am biased, I admit that, but he turned the 140th into one of the most disciplined and best regiments in the Union Army. So when O'Rourke joins the 140th, he drills them, whips them into shape, if you will, and then it's now time to go fight some battles. Their first battle was at Fredericksburg, where they weren't really engaged. The 140th, the 5th Corps that they were assigned to, was held in reserve, and so they didn't really see any action at the Battle of Fredericksburg. Several months later, in June of 1863, they fight in the Battle of Chancellorsville. Now, at this battle, the 140th does face the enemy for the first time, but O'Rourke's actually not with the men. The reason for that being, O'Rourke was acting as the brigade commander, okay? And now here is where a little controversy about O'Rourke comes into play. And what I mean by that is after the Battle of Chancellorsville, the Army is reorganized again. Hooker gets dismissed, Meade comes into the picture, right? And there's a little reorganizing going on. And O'Rourke, who is acting as brigade commander, is then sent back to the regiment. So essentially, he got it passed up for promotion. Well, why would that happen? Obviously, there's no concrete evidence. We can speculate, though. And the speculation is that because he was of Irish descent and an Irish immigrant, he was discriminated against. And therefore, he was passed up for this opportunity to be promoted. Now, this is a good and bad thing. Obviously, it sucks that he didn't get promoted. He didn't, he had to face some discrimination. But it means now he's back with the regiment. And after Chancellorsville, the armies begin marching north and ultimately end up in Gettysburg. So July 1st, the evening of July 1st into July 2nd, the 140th originally marches over to Hanover, which is, I can't remember the exact number, but several miles outside of Gettysburg. Overnight, the regiment marches from Hanover over to Gettysburg. And at the start of the battle, the 5th Corps is basically held in reserve behind the Union lines on Cemetery Ridge. If you're familiar with what happened during the Battle of Gettysburg, you'll know that the 3rd Corps under General Sickles, he didn't like his position. So he moved his men from Cemetery Ridge up forward to Seminary Ridge. And what ends up happening is that his entire left flank basically gets turned and is getting hammered by the Confederates. So immediately, the call is made for more troops to be sent to the area known as the wheat field. So O'Rourke and the brigade are marching towards the wheat field, and his regiment is trailing. So his regiment is the last regiment in the line of the brigade heading towards the wheat field. At the same time this is occurring, Confederates are beginning to advance and attack Little Round Top. On Little Round Top is a guy by the name of Governor Warren. Now, Governor Warren, he was the colonel of the 5th New York. And when the 140th joined the brigade that was with the 5th New York, Governor Warren was actually the brigade commander at that time. Eventually, he gets promoted, and at this time, during the Battle of Gettysburg, he was the chief engineer of the Army. So he's on Little Round Top. He understands that this is a vital position and that there's no troops on Little Round Top. So he immediately begins looking for troops to occupy Little Round Top. He first comes across Vincent's brigade, including the 20th Maine. If you're again familiar with the battle, you know that the 20th Maine fought on the left flank. Boo, yeah, boo. Nah. And so this brigade under Vincent is beginning to repel the Confederate attack, but the right flank of Vincent's line is held by the 16th Michigan. And the 4th and 5th Texas are beginning to turn the 16th Michigan's flank and thus causing them to fall back. Warren, seeing that this is occurring, immediately goes looking for more troops. And who does he find? He finds the 140th with Patrick O'Rourke at its head. So this is the moment in the meeting between General Warren and Colonel O'Rourke. So Warren comes up to O'Rourke and he says, "Patty, I need your troops. I need them up on this hill, and I need them now." O'Rourke, being a professional soldier, says, I have orders to go to the wheat field. I can't take my men up to Little Round Top. Warren looks at O'Rourke and he says, "Don't worry about that now. I will take responsibility." So O'Rourke has a choice. He can be the professional soldier and follow the orders that he was given, or he can take his men up on Little Round Top at the request of General Warren. And he decides to take his men up on Little Round Top. Now, as the men of the 140th are marching up Little Round Top, they're in what's called a marching column. It's not a fighting formation. They're in a marching formation. And as they're going up Little Round Top, all they can hear is the cannons, all right? In the valley between Little Round Top, Big Round Top, and Devil's Den, there was all kinds of musketry and carnage occurring. But the 140th did not know that until they reached the crest of Little Round Top, and then out before them is this chaotic scene. The 4th and 5th Texas are advancing. The 16th Michigan is retreating. O'Rourke sees the situation, dismounts from his horse, draws his saber, and then, as a professional soldier usually would not do, gives the order, "Follow me down this way, boys," and then turns and advances towards the enemy. At this moment, O'Rourke is shot in the neck and he is killed instantly. His men, however, did not stop to help and care for their fallen colonel. They rushed past him. Again, they're still in this marching formation. They are not in a fighting formation. By the way, they have not loaded their guns. They have not put their bayonets on their rifles. So they jump into the breach, if you will, and stop this Confederate advance with nothing more than human flesh. So when I talk about O'Rourke and the deeds they did, I give that higher credit and accolades than the left flank 20th Maine's charge. In my opinion, O'Rourke's actions to not only disobey his orders, to give a unmilitaristic command of "follow me down this way, boys," right? To me, that elevates him to where he is in our community. I just wish all communities felt the same way about him, and how instrumental he was to saving not only Little Round Top, but the Battle of Gettysburg. Had O'Rourke not done what he did, the Confederates would have been able to breach the lines on Little Round Top and then turn and essentially outflank the entire Union Army, right? So if you want to talk about, I mean, don't get me wrong, there was plenty of actions and moments of great bravery, and that turns into historically significant. But without O'Rourke's actions and the men of the 140th, that entire battle would have ended up completely differently. After he's killed, O'Rourke is buried behind Little Round Top. His father-in-law comes and retrieves the body and brings it back to Rochester. He has his funeral service at St. Bridget's, where he got married almost a year to the date prior. He was married in July of 1862 to Clara Bishop. I kind of skipped that part. Sorry about that. So he has his service at St. Bridget's, and the person who presides over this service is none other than Congressman John Williams, who gave him the appointment to West Point. He was originally buried in a Catholic cemetery on Pinnacle Hill. A salute was fired. One spectator called it one of the most touching and solemn rites we ever remember to have witnessed. Hundreds of people turned out for this service. He was buried in Pinnacle Hill, I believe at the top of the hill. And I don't have the dates, but he was eventually reinterred at the bottom of Pinnacle Hill. He then was reinterred again. Now, there is a little lore with the transfer of his body from Pinnacle Hill to where he ultimately is in Holy Sepulchre. So essentially what happened is they exhume the coffin, and it's painted gray. And on the coffin, with chalk, is written the name of who lies within. The coffins then are loaded onto open trolleys for the transport down Lake Avenue to Holy Sepulchre, Well, as fate would have it, it begins raining. And that chalk, which had O'Rourke's name on the coffin, washed off. So we're fairly certain that it is O'Rourke who's buried at Holy Sepulchre. But we can't say it with 100% certainty due to the lore of the chalk being washed off by the rain. So, After O'Rourke dies, his wife, Clara Bishop, she becomes a nun. And she actually was instrumental in the opening of about 3 different schools in the area where her convent was. So she also kind of made an impact on her community after O'Rourke had passed on. That about covers it in terms of the life of Colonel O'Rourke. I don't know how much time do I have time for any questions? Does anyone have any questions? Yes. So he is currently buried at Holy Sepulchre. If you go to the section, it would be the east section off of Lake Road. And if you know where that chapel is, he's buried about 100, 150 feet to the left of that chapel.
I'll take you there, sis.
So the question was, what school did he go to? The research that I did, there was no specific school other than, it was Rochester Public Schools. If my memory serves me correctly, so don't quote me on this, I believe it was school number 9 is the school he went to. It is now the Martin Luther King School. Was that correct? School number 9? Yeah. Perfect.
So he's allegedly buried at Holy Sepulchre.
That's the laptop?
Yeah, no problem though. Either I don't have the right cable. Connect laptop. Exactly.
Well, you could hook up to iPhone, right?
Well, I just learned something right there. That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, it's a relief because none of my.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. 10 Hood. Why, thank you, Colonel O'Connor. Now we have General O'Connor coming up.